This Independence Day, Real America's Voice proudly presents The Dawn of Liberty.
We celebrate the founding of our great nation.
Join Congressman Dan Crenshaw.
It's still pretty good to be an American. Still the best place to be.
Senator Joni Ernst.
Freedom is more than a word.
And a stirring performance by Beau Davidson with the United States Army Band.
We are blessed to live in freedom, blessed to live in peace.
This 4th of July, we honor our freedom, our heroes, and the unyielding American spirit.
God bless America.
The Dawn of Liberty on Real America's Voice starts right now.
Welcome to the Dawn of Liberty, an Independence Day special for Real America's Voice. I'm Beau Davidson. On July 4th each year, we celebrate the founding of our great nation, the United States of America. This year has special significance as we also celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States Army. And in today's special, I want to tie in why the Army's birthday is important, as next year we will celebrate America's 250th birthday, which is certain to bring heightened national significance. But 250 years ago, America was not a nation. It was just 13 colonies, a young group of immigrants who craved freedom from the British monarchy. And the precepts and ideas that they would create would last not just 250 years, but through an entire epoch of time, with America setting a precedent for what a free country could actually be. And the American mind, as Thomas Jefferson put it, was founded on a series of beliefs. 7 men are considered to be the founding fathers: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison. And while there is a perception out there that our founding fathers were old white men in wigs, the founding fathers were actually rather young men. Washington was 43 when he took control of the Army. Jefferson was just 33 when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. John Adams was 40 when he made the case for American independence. Hamilton was 33 when he was named Secretary of the Treasury. And Franklin, the oldest of the fathers, was 70 at the time of the Second Continental Congress. And perhaps in his wise ways, was the one who said that America was a republic if you can keep it. Meaning he had concerns that this new country could sustain the principles and values that the framers of the Constitution had bestowed. But perhaps never before or elsewhere in history did such a small group create such an unparalleled legacy in forming a relatively decentralized government, protection of basic rights, and the idea of the consent of the governed. But to understand the birth of our nation, we have to go back to 1607, when Jamestown was established in the new territory. The British colonies were marked by forced labor and indentured servitude. They were also marked by a policy of avoiding strict enforcement known as salutary neglect, which permitted an individual American spirit separate from the British motherland. However, the Stamp Act of 1765 bypassed the colonial legislatures, which of course drew the ire of the colonists. And then of course in 1773, the colonists revolted a tax on tea with the Boston Tea Party. It was Parliament's response to that, otherwise known as the Intolerable Acts, that caused the First Continental Congress to convene. The Congress produced a list of rights and grievances, which went unnoticed. The king did not acquiesce. Thus, a Second Continental Congress convened, which realized that certain rights must be codified, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They demanded consent by the governed. That Congress voted to declare independence on July 2nd, 1776, and signed the Declaration on July 4th. The Congress proposed republicanism as a stark departure from the British monarchy's rule. Let's take a closer look at the Declaration and the Bill of Rights to find out what was so critically important to the birth of this brand new nation. Thomas Jefferson was charged with drafting the Declaration, which he did largely in isolation from June 11th to June 28th. That document is the why the colonists felt it necessary to govern themselves. And in that first paragraph, Jefferson states that the laws of nature and nature's God entitle people to an equal station. And in that second famous paragraph, basic truths are self-evident, that the Creator endowed humans with basic rights. What Jefferson and the framers are saying is the current monarchy has transgressed basic human rights that a higher power, the Creator, intended for them. And when that happens, it becomes necessary, a moral imperative, a duty, as Jefferson actually calls it, to throw off that government and reclaim those rights. And then bam, Jefferson lists 27 things King George did that caused this usurpation of rights. Jefferson, in that very last paragraph, appeals to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions. Once again, realizing that they are appealing to a higher power and a higher moral code than King George's tyranny. What I think we have to recognize is just how inflammatory this document would be, because it would be considered treasonous, punishable by torture or death. When these 13 colonies decided to overthrow their government, it had magnanimous consequences for everybody involved. So when we talk about sacrifice, they were sacrificing their lives knowing they might not even live long enough to see America's birth. Alexander Hamilton was an expert military commander, leading Continental troops in the battles of Harlem Heights, White Plains, Princeton, and Trenton. But then George Washington asked him to join his staff as an aide, drafting many of the commander's orders. Hamilton, though, longed to be placed back in command in battle, which Washington always rejected. However, after much persuasion and even a threat to resign, Washington placed Hamilton in command of 3 battalions at the Battle for Yorktown. Hamilton was able to retake Redoubt number 10 with bayonets alone. Folks, not a single shot was fired. And his actions forced the Brits to surrender, which is considered the de facto end of the war. Many people know Hamilton as a great writer and a thinker, but perhaps fewer know of his great leadership in battle. That is, of course, until the musical Hamilton came along. When we think of our founding fathers, we often think of the sublime documents, which are a tribute to their impeccable minds. But equally important was their military tactics and genius, which took victory over a British army that thought this little skirmish would be put down in just a matter of weeks. They underestimated the revolutionaries, and in their loss gave rise to the sublime Republic of the United States. All of the stars had to align for this to happen. Or, if you believe the way the deistic founders did, that there was a divine providence for America, guided by the hand of the Creator himself. And I think that's relevant, because when you look at persecution in civilizations over time, even back to the ancient Israelites in Egypt, there is a hand of divinity in the exodus or the release of the people. And usually, it is a profound faith that binds the oppressed people. When you consider the vast amount of religious people who fled Europe to come to America, they wanted to be able to practice their faith without persecution. And America kept this promise to itself. So whether they were Presbyterian, Lutheran, Catholic, or Methodist, there was a sense of God in this new land, that he had set it aside, just like Canaan. And while modern historians have tried to diminish the effect of creationism that the founders believed in, there is no question that in their writings that they took basic moral precepts from Judeo-Christian philosophy. After all, they had read about oppression. So when they wrote, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary," they are quoting history. They know that it is repeating itself, and they know they need the help of the Creator himself to deliver them from evil. And as the saying, of course, goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That is what the monarchy had become. And these bold, audacious, ragtag 13 colonies said, enough is enough. We don't even feel connected to you anymore. God has promised us a better place. And with his help, we will be free from this tyranny. In Francis Scott Key's Star-Spangled Banner, he writes, "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light. The dawn always comes after the darkest night." And America was rising out of the darkness of oppression. That's why this special is called the Dawn of Liberty, because the colonists only had just a taste of liberty in the New World, not the full version that we experience today. They imagined it and they created it. It takes genius, courage, fortitude, providence, sacrifice, and execution to create something like these United States. In today's show, I want to walk through that process. I'm going to go back to the founders, ask some basic questions about why they did it, how they did it. I will seek the wisdom of senators and congressmen who have served on the battlefield and, in one gentleman's case, lost an eye due to an explosion. That is what it takes to uphold liberty. Our liberty is beautiful, it is coveted, but it is always also under attack. So I invite you today to learn and grow with me in today's show, The Dawn of Liberty.
You're watching The Dawn of Liberty, only on Real America's Voice. Welcome back to The Dawn of Liberty, right here on Real America's Voice.
Welcome back to The Dawn of Liberty. When considering the dawn of our nation, or any nation, one has to think about sacrifice. There are essentially no great nations that were not born from sweat, toil, tears, and great cost. When the colonists had had enough of British tyranny, they decided that freedom was worth the cost, which meant creating a military that could defeat the Brits. Someone who understands the valor and sacrifice of that early military is Congressman Dan Crenshaw, a Navy SEAL who became a member of the House of Representatives. Congressman, first of all, happy Independence Day to you.
Hey, happy Independence Day. Thanks for having me.
Congressman, I understand that from a very early age, you knew you wanted to be a part of the military's elite, which is, of course, the Navy SEALs. Tell me about when you had this realization and why you joined them.
Most SEALs you talk to have a similar story. We don't quite remember when we started that dream. I was maybe 11 or 12, but it started early. One of those childhood dreams because I actually read Dick Marcinko's book, Rogue Warrior. There's a lot of books on SEALs now, but back then that was the one everyone knew. Of course, there was the really cool movie with Charlie Sheen, Navy SEAls. But really that book hooked up a lot of my generation. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL well before 9/11. And that's actually the thing that gets you through it because you've been wanting something for so long. That's how you get through a program like BUDS. You either, because you know you're going to go in there and say, look, I'm either going to make it or I'm going to die. There's no other choice.
Well, you had 5 deployments overseas, and in 2012 you were hit by an IED in Afghanistan, which is how you lost sight in your right eye and even your left eye until your vision was restored. How did this experience change you in terms of your perspective of what it means to be an American soldier fighting for this great nation?
Well, I've got to look to the right a lot more. That's for sure. Death perception doesn't quite work, but people don't realize it really only matters about 3 feet in front of you. Those are jokes, but those aren't really jokes. How did it really change me is what your question is. Look, I know the cost of war better than anyone. And I know what is a good reason to send someone out in harm's way and what isn't. And, it's obviously a topic of conversation a lot these days. What are we getting ourselves into? How should we use America's might? Are we potentially getting into conflict? I at least have that perspective of how bad it can get. And I'm not even talking about myself. The perspective really is not from my injuries. It's from losing my friends. 8 or 9 of my good friends at least. And those funerals and staying in touch with those Gold Star families, that's the real sacrifice that we should be talking about. That's really what gives you true perspective.
That's true, because we see the external injuries, but we don't always see the internal injuries. And so, Congressman, in turning our focus to our nation's founding and that early army, I mentioned in the intro that great nations must be willing to sacrifice. How do you put into perspective the sacrifice of that first army and what it meant to the birth of the United States?
It's hard to put into words. They put it all on the line. The political environment wasn't exactly perfect for them. It wasn't like they had 90% of the population just ready to go. I mean, the nation was deeply divided on whether they should even fight the British. It kind of reminds you of the days before World War II, entering D-Day. Reminds you of now, right? We're deeply divided on whether we should take action. And they did it. They did it anyway. So the fact that you didn't have everyone behind you, you're going up against the greatest army and military in the world at that time. Yep. It's a little hard to put into words what kind of courage that truly takes. And I think when you talk about July, and of course that happened well before July 4th, Independence Day that we celebrate. And then I think what's significant about Independence Day is that's when the leaders of the country said, you know what, we have to sacrifice too. We have to put our names down. We have to put our names to this list, this Declaration of Independence, and put the targets right on our back. And the targets were on their back. I mean, they lost, just about all of them lost everything or were killed. And that was the political side finally getting behind the brave men who decided to join the Continental Army and start the fight with George Washington.
Yeah, Dan, I think about that group of relatively young men who got pissed off at King George and said, you know what, we're just going to declare our independence. And at that time, or at any time, the notion of overthrowing your government would seem to be a fool's errand. But then they wrote these grievances in a very eloquent way and said that the bonds of brotherhood have to be broken because of this usurpation of rights. If you could place yourself there in Philadelphia 250 years ago, what would you be saying to Jefferson and the others, do you think?
That's a really hard question. You know, it's crazy to think because if I were to place myself in that time, you realize I'd be like 8 years older than them, or maybe 15 years older than some of them.
Right.
I mean, first of all, that's a crazy thought. I mean, I don't know what I would say. That's a tough question. Good job. You guys are doing great. And I guess I would say, I would encourage them. I would love to encourage them and say, you are creating the greatest experiment that the world will ever know. And you can't possibly know that now, but you're doing it because what you're actually doing is you're writing down the greatest ideas and concepts and principles and philosophies that humanity had gathered over the course of 2,000 years. And you're putting it all in words right there in the Declaration of Independence. You know, I would give them encouragement.
You would be Team Revolution, not Team King George, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty safe to say.
Well,
Yeah.
and speaking of the founder's wisdom, in terms of leadership, I'm curious if you have a favorite founding father and the impression that he made on you.
Hard to say. It's easy to say George Washington, kind of war hero. So I would say George Washington. I want to give credit to a few, like Madison, architect of our Constitution, really made the fundamental arguments in the Federalist Papers. There's so many, but if you're going to make me pick one, I hate to press the easy button, but it's obvious. It's George Washington for quite a few reasons.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, next year will mark the 250th birthday of America and the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And we are still such a young country, yet in that document, as you said, and in the 4,500 or so words of our Constitution, we have created a sublime form of self-government. Do you think, Congressman, we have, for the most part, upheld what the founders intended?
For the most part, you know, we're down on ourselves a lot in this country, and we lose perspective too often. We fought a civil war. We fought a civil war in order to uphold those principles that they laid down on paper. I think they'd be proud of that. There's a lot of history that would indicate that that was their intention, to set the stage for the future of a truly free country. We have our problems, and we like to complain about them. But I think we should have a little perspective and compare ourselves to the rest of the world, compare ourselves to history. And I think we should think that we're doing pretty good. It's still the best place to be. It's still pretty good to be an American. And especially when we get to our 250th birthday, I can't wait for that celebration. I think a little perspective should be in order.
Yeah, we are imperfect, warts and all, but I agree with you. I think that America is an exceptional place, one that's as aspirational as it is anything else. And on that note, what American values do you think are unique to us as Americans that we can lead by example?
I think America is built off of this idea of sacrifice and resilience, as you indicated. Other countries are also. It depends on who you're referring to, but you know, fundamentally, it's about self-governance and this idea that you own your own destiny. That's what it should be about, anyway. Maybe that idea has fallen away, unfortunately, in recent years, but for the most part, still strong. I think your average American believes in a world that they can shape for themselves in a way that I don't think is true in many other places. I think that's really special.
It is. It is. The fact that you can create your own destiny, which goes back again to what the founders wanted as they created those sublime documents. Congressman, I got to ask you a question about Texas, because I know that in Texas, Texans take life, liberty, and happiness very seriously. Some say that these ideals might even be bigger in Texas. And there's this song called Uncle Sam in Mexico from the Rough and Ready songster that goes, young Texas came of age quite young, and then she married Uncle Sam. She sewed her star fast to his flag, and it shall shine there while there's a rag. Talk to me about Texas's unique place as its own laboratory of independence.
Where do you want me to begin? I mean, yeah, so I guess, yeah, we joined the Union, I think, in 1845, gained our independence from Mexico, and the Sam Houston's beating Santa Anna's army in, 1832. It is the epitome of the story. Obviously, the Texians at the time drew a lot of courage and inspiration from the revolution itself, and decided to embody it and move forward with it in a very, very American way. That's why we love our Texas history. We're very proud of it. We say it's I'd certainly say it's the greatest nation in the country.
Well, Texas always seemed to me like they're just kind of that they take it so seriously in terms of their independence and their life, their liberty, their happiness. Perhaps I don't want to say more than other areas, but it sure seems like it sometimes if you meet a Texan, especially like yourself. Dan, finally, I know you became a father in 2023, and I became one last year. What do you want to instill? Thank you, and congrats to you as well. What do you want to instill in your daughter as she grows up at a time when people in this country are spitting on and burning our American flag?
More than anything, resilience, mental toughness, integrity, honor, an understanding of moral certainty. Because it's not so much about, you got to understand why people are burning the flag. Because they're bitter. They believe in moral relativism. They lack perspective. They lack any appreciation for the things they have. A lot of these themes we've been talking about during this interview. You instill the right values in people, which are very, very basic, by the way. They're not going to end up burning a flag. And I hope that I could keep adding to that list, as I'm sure you could for your new child. But I think those are some of the most important. Helping them understand that if they put the work in, they can shape their own destiny. Again, it's just what it means to be an American.
I just think about what Reagan said about, freedom being only one generation away from extinction. When our kids, when your daughter and my son grow up, the type of world they will be growing up in, we can only do what we can do as parents. But are you concerned for the next generation?
We should always be concerned. It's why we fight and do what I do. It's not fun. But you got to keep the ship steering in the right direction. The thing I worry about is what we've seen in the last 20 years, the advent of social media, the internet. It's created you would think it would create more informed and more educated conversations, but it hasn't. It's more opportunity for slander, and there's a lack of critical thinking. I think we lose freedom when we lose critical thinking. And lose our ability to argue sensibly over issues that matter. And we should argue. That's the whole point of politics, is to argue and disagree. People shouldn't be so down on the fact that we're not unified. You're never going to be unified. You're supposed to have two different sides, basically, philosophies of how to run the country. That's okay. But the lack of critical thinking is what concerns me the most. Now, again, but I'm not a catastrophist like many are. I think if you force me to bet on a country, I would definitely bet on America right now, and especially now, I think we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, America was always a laboratory of ideas, and it continues to be. Well, Congressman, thank you so much for your reflections today, and thank you as well for your service to this great nation. Happy Independence Day to you, sir.
You're watching The Dawn of Liberty, only on Real America's Voice. Welcome back to The Dawn of Liberty, right here on Real America's Voice.
Welcome back to the Dawn of Liberty. As we reflect upon the bountiful blessings this nation has bestowed, we go back to those earliest days and months that led to American independence. At that time, the Senate was all but just a thought, but an important one in our future nation. In fact, it wasn't until 1787 that the framers arrived at the so-called Great Compromise, which provided that the states would be represented equally in the Senate. I wanted to call upon one of our current senators, Joni Ernst of Iowa, to provide some thoughts and reflections about our beautiful government and nation. Senator, thank you so much for being a part of this special.
Oh, it's a wonderful opportunity for me to join you. Thanks so much, Beau.
Absolutely, we appreciate you. And Senator, I know that you likely bleed red, white, and blue, considering A, what you're wearing, and your life and career. But if you would, take me back to the first time you really could understand what this great nation is all about.
Well, it actually started in 1989. I was a young student at Iowa State University, and during my summer break, I had the opportunity to participate in an agricultural exchange to the Soviet Union. And of course, I've always been a wonderful patriot, always supported the United States of America. But on that trip to the Soviet Union, I fully understood what a magnificent country I live in compared to all of these other different types of governments around the world. We truly are blessed to live in a democratic republic here in the United States of America. But it just grew my patriotism even stronger since that opportunity to visit the Soviet Union in 1989.
Yeah, you said the right word, blessed. I think we are absolutely blessed, and sometimes people need to go outside of the country to realize the blessings we have within our own country. And obviously this country meant a great deal to you since you joined the U.S. Army Reserves after graduating from Iowa State. You served as a company commander in Kuwait and Iraq in 2003, leading 150 Iowans in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And now I understand your daughter serves in the U.S. Army. Tell me about your decision to join the Army and how you felt when leading your troops in Iraq.
Absolutely. And it did stem from that time that I spent in the Soviet Union. So I got back from that agricultural exchange and decided that I need to give back to my country. We live in such an incredible place. And the way I felt I could give back was by providing my service. So I joined Army ROTC at Iowa State University and went on to serve over 23 years between the U.S. Army Reserves and the Iowa Army National Guard, commanded at every level through battalion commander. And, you know, it truly was one of the greatest honors of my life to wear our nation's uniform.
Yeah, and speaking of the uniform, we had some really great images while you were talking just now of you in your 23 years of military service, so we certainly thank you for that service. Now with the Army, Senator, having just celebrated its 250th birthday, we think back to 1775 when the Continental Army was created. What qualities of George Washington do you admire in terms of his leadership of what would become these United States?
Well, and you said it, you said leadership. And I appreciate probably my favorite founding father, George Washington, of course, that led the Continental Army and then went on to serve as our first president of these great United States. But it was his leadership, the fact that he inspired others to follow him towards that common goal of setting the United States apart from Britain. And or from England. And it just truly resonates today too. Leaders need to inspire others to follow them towards a common goal or objective for the good of the unit or the organization, or in George Washington's case, the colonies as they formed a new union. So we are so blessed that we had such an incredible founding father, but leadership truly, the selfless service coming from George Washington and our other founding fathers, they truly were going out on a limb, you know, defying the English monarchy to establish our new country. And here we are today, 250 years later, 250 years strong. Not that our nation hasn't experienced hardships, but we truly learn and become a better nation every single year we are in existence.
We do, and Senator, I was going to ask you who your favorite founding father was, and you just took the words right out of my mouth and explained it so eloquently about Washington. James Madison apparently wrote to Thomas Jefferson saying that the framers considered the Senate to be the great anchor of government, an offense against the fickleness and the passion of the House. How do you view your role as a senator in terms of the great responsibility that comes with this job?
Well, I think James Madison said it very well. And yes, I take the responsibility very seriously, as do all of my colleagues. And it is why, and many people will debate this, but the 60 vote threshold, the filibuster that we have in the United States Senate, many people will argue about this, but it is because the Senate is very different than the House of Representatives. We were established that way. So just as the old adage goes, is that we are the saucer beneath that teacup so that we can pour the tea into the teacup, allow it to, or into the saucer and allow it to cool down. So we slow things down in the Senate. We require extensive debate in the Senate. And because we have a greater passage threshold than the House does, it does require us to interact a lot more, maybe with people that we disagree with. And I think that is the beautiful thing about, again, our democratic republic, is that we have these discussions, we can debate the issues, and at the end of the day, we meet that threshold, then it becomes law. But I truly believe in our form of government. I know that all of our senators take their roles very, very seriously. And the way our forefathers established this government, it was truly brilliant because many of them were coming out of a government that was a monarchy, where they were just simply told what to do it, and do it now. And here we have people that are willing to debate and consider other ideas. And because of that, I do believe our nation is much, much stronger.
A republic if you can keep it, as they say, and hopefully we have kept it. What have you enjoyed most about being a senator, and what legislation are perhaps you most proud of that you helped pass so far?
Well, of course, I'm very honored to be a United States Senator. And if someone had told me years ago, when I was a kid growing up on a farm in Southwest Iowa, coming out of a very rural community, that I would ever be serving as a United States Senator, I probably would have laughed. It's such a great responsibility, and just an incredible honor. So I have enjoyed it. I enjoy representing the people of Iowa. I still live in Iowa, go back to the home community where I was born and raised. It's where I live today. And it's really important for me to represent their voices here. And so I love that so much, being able to represent my friends, my family, fellow Iowans. And then, of course, just serving in the Senate, it is such a great responsibility. But again, we know that it is important to have lively debates and represent our home states. So all of the legislation that I work on is very important. I've had many, many meaningful pieces of legislation that have been passed, but one that I am going to just visit briefly about is Sarah's Law, which is something that was incorporated into the Laken-Riley Act. It was the first piece of legislation that President Trump signed when he came into office for his second term. And it is named after a young Iowan who was killed by an illegal migrant 9 years ago. And what we are hoping is that this will prevent others like Sarah, who had missed out on the opportunity for justice for so long, to see justice in a timely manner.
Absolutely. That is important work and a great bill, great piece of legislation. Senator, we know those famous words that gave rise to our great nation: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It seems that one could not exist without the other, but if you would, pick one of them and tell us in your own words what that particular ideal means to our country's exceptionalism.
Well, I'll start with life. I think they're all very important, and I am unabashedly pro-life. I make no apologies for it, because I think God gave us life, and every life is important, and every life brings value into this world. And so I remain steadfast in that commitment to supporting life. We here in the United States should value life and understand that even amongst the most vulnerable in our population, they bring value to these great United States. When it comes to liberty, I believe in liberty. We should cherish liberty, but we also must defend it. it, which is why I think it's incredibly important that we have young men and women that are willing to step up and wear the flag of our nation as a military serviceman or woman, because we must defend liberty at all costs. And of course, the pursuit of happiness. We have the opportunity here in the United States to pursue great happiness as long as it's not infringing upon the rights of other people. So I think that, again, when these documents were crafted so many years ago, the brilliance of the writers and the designers of this incredible country. They were so forward thinking and knowing that these would stand the test of time. We've seen 2.5 centuries now of continuous growth in the United States. We are stronger than ever. We are better than ever. And it is why so many nations around this globe continue to look to the United States of America to be that beacon of freedom and hope, that beacon of light when there are troubled times around this world. So I am incredibly thankful that I have had the opportunity to be born and raised in these great United States of America, and now to be able to serve in the United States Senate representing the great people of Iowa.
Senator, to your point about being a beacon, we live in a volatile world where peace is precious, especially as we think about what's going on in the Middle East. Tell our viewers what America has meant in terms of its template, an example of freedom to the world in a security sense and also in an aspirational sense.
Well, it means everything, Beau, absolutely everything. When we look at freedom and opportunity, and again, I'll juxtapose the Soviet Union against the United States when I first decided to serve my country, is that the Soviet Union was a world superpower. The United States was a world superpower. But what country truly gave their citizens every opportunity to succeed, knowing that we give people a chance, and they take that chance, they can make it big in life, but it's entirely up to them. So I'm blessed. I am so blessed. And so freedom is more than a word. It's more than an ideal. It is a lifestyle in the United States of America. Other countries look to us as an example of freedom. It's why we have so many people that try to enter into the United States. And we want them to do that, of course, legally. But there are people that all around the world, they look at what we have and what we're able to achieve, regardless of where we are born, regardless of socioeconomic status. We can break free. We can do better. It's our choice in how we maintain our lives and how we move forward in our lives. It should be something that the rest of the world strives to see with their own citizens. Unfortunately, there will be many people that are trapped in authoritarian regimes. But, we set the example for the free world. Freedom, freedom, freedom.
Yeah, well, Senator, before we let you go, I'm looking at these great images of children with American flags running through fields, and I think about just that kind of just vintage picture of Americana. What is our responsibility as we think about July 4th and Independence Day of things that we as parents, as leaders, as communities must pass down to this next generation?
Well, I think, and I am a parent, and I think living by example is extremely important, and loving our country. I know that there are troubled times sometimes out there, and people will be out rioting in the streets. But I think it's incredibly important that we share with our children and future generations that nowhere else are you able to go out and demonstrate against maybe a part of your leadership or espouse different thoughts than those in leadership. We allow you to do that here in the United States of America. Anywhere else, you would not be allowed to do that. So I think it's important that we love our country. You may not love all of the leaders of our country, but it is important to love our country. I appreciate those that say the Pledge of Allegiance. I appreciate those that will share prayer as they are going about their daily lives. We can do that in the United States of America. And I appreciate those that want to serve their country. And service comes in so many different forms or manners, whether you are serving in uniform, whether you are serving as a first responder, maybe you're a volunteer in your community. Service comes in so many different ways, and we should all step up and provide a level of service back to our communities, our state, and perhaps even our nation. But those are the things that we need to pass on to future generations, is a true love and dedication to our country, because we are all so blessed to be here. And like you said at the top of the show, is, you know, maybe sometimes you don't understand the significance of what we have here in the United States until you have been in another nation where you're deprived of the liberties and the freedoms that we enjoy every single day here in the United States of America.
Absolutely, Senator. I couldn't have said it better. We must count our blessings. Well, thank you so much, Senator Ernst, and happy Independence Day to you.
And right back to you, Beau. Thank you so much. God bless the U.S.
It was our pleasure.
You're watching The Dawn of Liberty, only on Real America's Voice. Welcome back to The Dawn of Liberty, right here on Real America's Voice.
Welcome back to The Dawn of Liberty. I hope you have enjoyed this Independence Day special that has included the reflections of our elected representatives who have served this great nation and a history that we should all remember. As a musician, I have a natural curiosity for what music was like during the American Revolution. Music was a way to provide calls to command and other battle messages. Drummers actually had a very important role in rhythmic cadences, which could change battle strategy and troop formations. And musicians were synonymous with reveille, to be played each day at daybreak for troops to rise and be ready for the day's duties. The fife was also important, as it could be heard even above gunfire. Originally, the song Yankee Doodle that we all know was sung by British troops to mock their colonial counterparts. Now, this only created a sense of pride among the colonists, eventually reclaiming the song as a measure of defiance, and it even became a form of national pride. George Washington commented that, quote, music of the Army in general is very bad. He ordered that the drum and fife majors exert themselves to improve it, or they will be reduced, demoted, and their extraordinary pay taken from them. He went on to say that specific hours would be assigned for all the drums and fifes of each regiment to attend them and practice. Washington, thankfully, was heartened by the birthday serenade he was given by the Army Band in sub-freezing temperatures in 1778. Since that time, of course, the U.S. Army Band has achieved a level of national prominence and excellence, and I know this from personal experience. As an artist, I had the tremendous privilege of being asked by Pershing's Own, as the U.S. Army Band is known, to collaborate with them in a virtual performance of my composition, Blessed. What you are about to see is a performance in which I performed my portion while hunkered down in the pandemic in Memphis, Tennessee, and the U.S. Army Band performing their parts in their installation in Fort Myer, Virginia. I was truly honored that they approached me about accomplishing this virtual concert, as it were, during a time when musicians could not perform together and audiences couldn't hear them in person. So as we round out this Independence Day special, The Dawn of Liberty, let us never forget how truly blessed we are and how the flame of liberty must never be extinguished.
What is courage? What is honor? All these words are just ideals long forgotten. What is duty? What is glory? Are they just written down in some old story? When we hear a word like freedom, do we know what it really means? Or do we take it all for granted, living like kings and queens? We are blessed to live in freedom, blessed to live in peace, blessed with food and shelter, blessed with life on lease. Did our